G'day and welcome back to GRDC In Conversation. Today we're in Geelong with Darcy Warren from Far Australia. And if you've ever wondered how a leafy suburb kid ends up running national trials across Western Australia, Tassie and the southern mainland, this one's for you. Darcy didn't grow up on a farm. He found agriculture almost by accident at a university open day. He got his first proper start through a graduate program co-supported by GRDC and Agriculture Victoria. And then he's gone on to build a career around turning paddock data into decisions growers can actually use. In this conversation, we cover what it's like helping lead a team that's expanded from 4 people to a national footprint, what the last season looked like when you can literally watch disease move down the country, and why the next era of agronomy is as much about people, communication and systems as it is about biology and chemistry. Darcy Warren, you're the first person we're sitting down with for the next series of GRDC. And I think what's quite cool is we've covered a lot of the areas that you're involved in. Obviously, in the northern growing regions, the south, which is very much home to you, and then the west. But mate, welcome to the GRDC In Conversation podcast and welcome to Geelong. It's good to sit down with you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for having me. And it's an honour to be first cab off the rank for this series.
I think it's quite cool. Like, I love this spot, which is where I used to work out of here in Geelong. But it reminds me a bit of Esperance, which might be clutching at straws. But you've got like the sunrise that comes up over the bay out here. You've got GrainCorp kind of over the back. It really is quite an agriculture hub. So just tell me, how did you end up here in Geelong?
Yeah, well, it was a bit of a long story now, but a few opportunities sort of came up, and I guess the move to Geelong sort of came about asking, would it be all right if you moved to Geelong as part of a job? And at the time, my wife was working in Werribee and I was working up in Yarrawonga. And I think we were getting sick of the drive up and down the Hume. So when we sort of got the offer to move to Geelong, I was like, yeah, unreal. We'll definitely take that one.
Geelong's definitely a bit closer.
Yep. And yeah, we're pretty well set up here now. So can't see us moving, I don't know, medium to long term. I think we're pretty happy here.
How long have you been like down this way, obviously with Far Australia?
Oh, good question, actually. I think coming up to 8 years. I started with Far Australia in 2017 and moved to Geelong in 2017. So, yeah, it seems to go on very quickly because I still feel like we're pretty new to the area, but we've sort of bought a house here now and set up a family and really enjoy it.
Big few years. Mate, I want to ask you, and I think there's going to be a whole range of different things we can talk to from managing the team that you've got today. But if we just take a step back, you grew up on the outer suburbs of Melbourne and didn't necessarily have huge exposure to agriculture, but I think it's one of these stories that is so cool to kind of tell because there'll be so many other people who are either in agriculture today who have a story like you, or maybe could be our future agros, scientists, people involved in the grain sector. So tell me a little bit about where you grew up and how did you discover agriculture?
Yeah, so I grew up in the fairly leafy suburb of Greensborough up in Melbourne. And yeah, I guess maybe a bit of a minority in the industry, but I'm sure there's plenty around like me, but spent the first 17, 18 years of my life not knowing anything about agriculture at all. I grew up, obviously Greensborough is just down the road from La Trobe Bundoora campus. And I guess the way you could say I fell into it was in year 11. I knew going through high school, I liked science, I liked plants. I was sort of looking for a course, ticking those kind of boxes, working outside. So I was looking at some environmental type courses to go into uni. And Dad and I went to a La Trobe Open Day when I was in year 11, and we're just going to some of those talks about courses. And I think we accidentally walked into the one about ag science. And I was saying, we're here now, may as well sit through it and hear what it's about. And then the guy presenting in that lecture theatre was a guy called Peter Sale. And if you haven't come across Peter Sale, he's just very enthusiastic and very infectious about his enthusiasm about agriculture. And I remember looking across at Dad and we both sort of shrugged and nodded and said, well, this actually ticks a lot of the boxes that I was looking for. And so I think from about year 11, my goal was to do ag science at university. That was how I got into it essentially. And was pretty blind. I didn't know anything about ag. I couldn't have told you, I don't know, what a header was and the real basic stuff, just a lot of blind spots. I've probably got a lot of blind spots still today And I was always playing catch up, I feel. But yeah, absolutely love the course.
I've got probably three kind of key questions. The first one I just want to come back to was, if you hadn't have by chance stumbled across like the agriculture conversation, if you were to take yourself back to year 11, Darcy, what do you think when you'd seen ag on the paper, would it have even registered to you as a career pathway, or do you reckon you would have glossed over?
If I'd not walked into the talk but seen it on paper, I think I would have recognised that there was a lot of things that would have interested me. And I don't know why, but I do remember, I think Dad used to work in sort of a few different industries, but including sort of welding. And he used to go to some like the big expos and field days. So I do remember he did take me to a few, field days where they'd have stalls for all different companies. So I don't know why we did that, but I do remember going to some ag things like that. So I think Dad was very open, or thought it was a good industry to go into. So I think if I saw it on paper, potentially still might have gone into it, but looking back now, it's hard to think what else I'd do really.
And so tell me about Peter. I want to know more about him. What was he talking about and how was he talking about it that you recall just grabbed you straight away as a 16-year-old?
Well, it's a good question. I've got a shocking memory, but I just remember his enthusiasm. He was very animated and obviously just sold it really well. He was talking about the opportunities in ag, which seemed to be really, plentiful. And I guess as a student, worrying about what job I might get, an industry where there was plenty of jobs seemed really appealing, and just the wide range of things you could go in from ag. Because I remember thinking about some of my friends that were doing teaching, like you do the course, you become a teacher essentially, and maybe you can choose primary school or high school. Whereas ag, I remember him saying, well, there's people that go out of ag, work for a bank, or you go work with livestock, or you work with plants, you could be a consultant. There was just all these different things you could go into and sort of form a different career. And I think at that stage, I sort of just, like I said, I sort of fell into it. I was sort of floating through things, and keeping my options broad seemed pretty appealing.
It is funny, like I just think back to whether it's Marcus Oldham or like an ag science or ag economics course, you literally have people who sit in the same room, study the same things. And as you're saying, some will go and become agros, some will become farm managers. The odd person might become like an investment banker. You've got obviously your grain traders, banking, even down like to this like communications marketing. It's literally everyone's in the same room learning the same thing, but that sphere of agriculture is so broad.
Yeah, and I guess one of the things that probably sold it to me over maybe like a pure environmental science or a job where I might have ended up just studying a single native plant out in the forest somewhere was, obviously it ticks the box of being outside and working with science and plants, which are appealing to me. But the fact that in agriculture you could be working a lot more with people, and the work that you're doing is having a direct benefit on people, I think was something that I wanted to aspire to as well back then.
And so did you come across Peter as you went in and studied at La Trobe? Was he one of your lecturers or something?
Yes. Particularly, I think it was the third year, we had a subject with Peter, and that was fantastic. And it's funny, actually, like I still got the notes from that subject in my desk drawer, which are probably a bit out of date now. But I flick through them every now and then, and there's still some pretty relevant stuff. And it's funny now having a better network in the industry, because obviously growing up in Melbourne, just having no network, no family ties to the industry, like it was kind of tough earlier in my career. But looking back through that book now where Peter's sort of talked to different people, and all the names in there are actually familiar to me now. And there's even Nick Poole, who obviously I've worked a lot with at Far Australia. He features in there, and going through uni, I wouldn't have known him from a bar of soap.
How did you get started then? Like off the back of university, where did you start to look for opportunities, and how did you start to make those networks and that next step?
Like I said, it was pretty tough making those first steps into the industry, not knowing anyone. And so I'd probably applied for a few jobs that I was wildly unqualified for and knew nothing about, just as a few Hail Marys. But then I was really fortunate to get into a grad program that was half funded by GRDC, half funded by the Victorian State Government, or AgVic. And that was essentially the perfect start for me. So it was a program that was designed to get grads into the grain industry. So a lot of the other grad positions with the state government was designed to get people into state government, whereas this one was, they were hoping you'd find a job elsewhere in the industry. So we had 3 different placements in that program. So I spent a bunch of time with the state government, so working with Dale Gray, who I guess I could call my first mentor in the industry, and it's hard to find a better mentor than Dale Gray. Loved working with him, doing a lot of the climate products, the very fast break that he does. And then spent another big chunk of time doing grower group or research work, which took me, so it's still employed by the grad program, but moved up to Yarrawonga, where I did some work with Riverine Plains and Far Australia, which is how I sort of got to know the team there. So spent a season up at Yarrawonga, absolutely loved the research side of it. I think from that point is I knew I sort of wanted to work in that research space.
And then, so how did the role then evolve? Because I think when we talked last time, you were saying the grad program, although it was so partly GRDC, partly government, and then also partly private sector, it was this real mix of worlds and people you got to deal with?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a lot of that was set up by Dale in that program. So using his contacts with some different organisations. So I even did a couple of days with a private agronomist up in that Dookie Yarrawonga region. But yeah, it was just designed to get you as much experience as you could. Did a lot of PDs as part of that. And so, yeah, really learnt a lot, early in my career.
And then, so how did the opportunity with Far Australia come up, and how did that evolve? Was it one conversation, or was it just this natural kind of progression?
I have quite a fond memory of this one conversation, because I remember going through the grad program. Far back then was quite a small team. So there was four members. So I've been working with Michael Strait up in Yarrawonga. But then obviously the team was led by Nick Poole. There was Tracy Wiley down in Geelong. They'd been trying to find a fourth member for a while. And when I was working with them as a grad, they had a fourth member as part of the company. And I remember going through thinking, Far Australia would be an awesome place to work, but it's a pretty small team. I didn't think the employment opportunities would be there. But I think towards the end of the grad program, I remember I was driving down the Hume. I had a bunch of dry matter samples to drop off to Nick, I think, because my partner was living in Melbourne at that stage. So I was coming down to Melbourne anyway, so I was dropping some samples off to Nick, and we just met at the Tullamarine Hungry Jacks. And so Nick was like, let's go sit down and I'll shout you a burger, which I thought was awesome. I don't mind a bit of takeaway. And it seems a bit dingy, but it was in that Hungry Jacks that he asked if I would like to work full-time for Far Australia. And it seems a bit, like I said, not very glamorous, but it's probably the perfect way to woo me. Not that I would have said no anyway. So that's where my career with Far Australia started, at the Tullamarine Hungry Jacks. And perfect start for a perfect career so far.
So now you can't drive to Northern Victoria from here without driving past and just going back to that one conversation.
We park near there when we're flying interstate. So I always drive past that Hungry Jacks and just look on it fondly.
I want to ask you I'll just ask you now, those, I guess, chance encounters and that ability of, like, say, yourself and Nick to sit down, have a chat just to learn more about each other, but then ultimately to have a job opportunity come up. Have there been moments like that you've tried to recreate with other people coming through who you eventually hope will start to join your team?
I guess that experience was maybe a little bit unique because I'd essentially had a whole season as a job interview, essentially. So I'd worked with Far as a grad for an entire season, so they could see how I worked, where my knowledge sort of lacked, and whether they wanted to pick me up or not. So I think it was quite opportune, and I always feel guilty about the way I feel like I've almost floated through my career and just fell into positions. But we've been really lucky to build the team at Far that we have. So as I said, when I first started, there was 4 of us, and we're now a team of 15 across the country. We've opened up offices. Obviously, back then we had the office in Mulwala on the Victorian New South Wales border and an office in Geelong. But now we've opened up in WA and have this national team, and we've got some really good young people that I'm really excited about working for us. And I guess the staffing is really important we call it the Far family. And it's important that we keep that family feeling as when there was just 4 of us in the business, keeping that culture in the business as we sort of expand. And I think we've done that successfully so far. But it is one of the bigger challenges, finding the right people for the company. And I guess it's experience for everyone across the industry trying to build that team that can take you forward.
I want to ask you more about that in a second. I just want to come back to something you said around you felt maybe a little bit guilty how you've floated through your career and kind of I guess, found yourself into jobs. Talk to me more about that, because I think that's a really interesting insight. But, I guess you've never set out and gone, in 5 years, I'll be this. Like, have you had those big career plans, or have you kind of just said, I'm just going to see where I go in this role right now?
Probably closer to the latter, I'd say. I guess coming into the industry, not knowing much, it was hard to sort of plan too far ahead or know what I could go into. And the way coming into FAR, the way Nick sort of sold it to me back in that Hungry Jacks was that we're a small team. And so if you're worried that there's not going to be a place for you to sort of go up in the business, don't be, because the plan back then was to grow the business around the core people. And that's essentially what's happened. So as we've put more people on, I've gained more responsibility in the business from then. And yeah, for a long time, that the interview I did with the grad program, I was probably the only interview I did for the next decade sort of thing. Whereas my partner, on the other hand, it seemed like she was doing one every other week in the public system.
In the past, someone's spoken to me and mentioned this piece around like nearly making themselves redundant. But I guess it's nearly that backfill of you probably, grew within a role, started to do a whole other role while doing your existing one, and then kind of propped up. So talk me how your roles evolved across the time you've been with FAR Australia.
Yeah, well, I guess that's the thing I've really enjoyed about FAR is that obviously there's a lot of variety in what we do. If you came and looked and saw what I did day to day, you'd think it was very repetitive. But then when you look at it over a season, there's a lot of variety there. And then obviously between seasons, there's a lot of variety. And so the nature of the work that we do is always changed with different projects. And I know I'm always so busy. I'm not really worried about not having enough to do, and always happy to delegate to some of the newer members of the team. So yeah, easy to take on more responsibility as the team's grown. And so that's created new jobs or new tasks within the team that need to be done as the business has grown and projects have changed over the years.
So talk to me today, like what does a week look like, or a month, say, in your life, and what's the work you guys are actually doing as a team?
Yeah, well, at the moment, day to day, we're all stuck in the office at the moment, which for a team that loves the outdoors, I don't think it's everyone's favourite time of year, but it's also very exciting. So at the moment, we're doing all our reporting, so looking at the results from the season just gone and putting that together, whether it's for clients or for project reports for GRDC. And we're also getting ready we've got some presentations coming up at the updates as well. So trying to get data ready for those to be able to put it, present it to industry. As we sort of move, we largely in the role we do follow the season as a grower would. So March for us is all about planning for the upcoming season, trying to get projects locked down and organising seed, I guess even at that earlier stage, just trying to get everything ready, because when we hit April, it's all about sowing. So April, May, sowing, getting everything in the ground, probably across the country. So often there'll be times where we'll have a seeder going in WA, Vic, Tassie, New South Wales, which there's, I guess, mainly Nick and I these days, but coming from those days when there was just 4 of us in the team to now sowing in 4 different states at the same time, it still just baffles us a fair bit. And then obviously after sowing, winter sort of quietens down a little bit for us, but then as soon as spring hits, we're busy putting out sprays, doing our assessments on the trials and running our field days. And springtime just is so busy for us. Everything is just happening at once. But it's an exciting time of year. You get more interaction with growers at your field days. Everything's looking good. Differences are coming out in the trials. So you're just trying to capture as much data as you can to tell your story. Try and make report writing a bit easier on yourself by getting as much data as you can. And then you sort of come into harvest season, which for us, we sort of start in WA probably in November. And then it sort of flows all the way through to Vic. We're sort of around Christmas and New Year's, we're still harvesting. And then Tassie, where we're about to start harvesting next week, hopefully, which, at the time of recording will be the first week of Feb. So it sort of drags out a long time. And then, wash, rinse, repeat. We're sort of into planning again.
And so just the sheer breadth of people you come across, but operating across those 4 key regions, give me a summary of the 2025 year and what you guys saw through your own trials, maybe some surprises, but also to what you were just observing with that ability to cover Australia.
Yeah, well, it keeps it very interesting for us. And I guess that spread's quite good for the business because like we cover a lot of aspects of cropping and agronomy in our trials, but we do a lot of disease work as well. So this year was quite interesting because in WA we've had a brilliant season and we've had sites where we've had waterlogging issues, but disease has been quite high. But then we've had other regions where, particularly in southwest Vic, but particularly in the east and the south, where it was quite a dry start to the year and a lot of the growers in our areas were struggling to get crops up. So having these different contrasts with the different areas is really quite interesting. It gives us a good chance to have like a national view of what's going on. So I think a good example of that this year was the last few years, in particular, stripe rust in wheat has been really bad. And so I feel like this year everyone was sort of waiting for it to come in. And with our network of sites, we could sort of see it coming down. Like one of the first places we saw it was our site in Wollongbean up in New South Wales, sort of just west of Canberra. Mm-hmm. And we sort of there, one of the first places, and then sort of hit Yarrawonga next. And then we saw it at Bordertown, Millicent, Narwarri, where we are in southwest Vic. So we could sort of follow it down. It sort of came in a bit later this year, and it was around the time of the field day. So we were able to sort of talk to growers about that. And yeah, it was quite interesting sort of seeing some of those effects as well.
One thing I want to ask you is, what's a part of your role that maybe I'll say you don't necessarily love, but is a necessity for you to enjoy the other aspects of it?
Yeah, I think it's sort of evolved a bit over my career, but we travel a lot with our network of sites. Like I'll probably sound ungrateful whinging about this. And it was quite exciting at the start of my career saying I'm traveling for work. But after a while, sometimes you do wish you were just at home. But I'm really lucky. So I get to travel to some of the most beautiful places around the country. So we've got sites in Esperance or near Esperance in Albany. And like there's some of the most beautiful places down in Tassie. Our site overlooks the Western Tiers down there. And often you'll see snow up on the mountains. Even at our field day in November, you'll see some snow up there. The southwest of Vic is beautiful, close to some really nice beaches. And Yarrawonga, after spending a year there in my grad program, it always holds a special place for me. So I love travelling, but it does sometimes get a bit old. Yeah, I think it was particularly hard when we first moved to Geelong and my wife didn't know anyone here and I was all of a sudden just jetting off to Tassie every other week. There's been times where it's been hard, but just recently we've started a family here in Geelong and I was heading across to WA for sowing at the start of 2025 and they actually came across with me. And normally when I'm away for work, I'm just there to get the job done and then try and get back home again and sort of make it short and sweet as possible. So I've never really, stopped to check out the areas too much, which I've sort of regretted a little bit in my time. But when I went across to WA earlier last year, my family actually came across with me, my wife and daughter, and it actually forced me to actually take some time to explore the local area. So instead of just working through the weekend to get sowing or jobs done, I actually took some time to actually see some of the beautiful beaches there, pinched one of the work cars, did some beach driving around Esperance, and it's made me realise that I need to enjoy my work trips a lot more. Like I'll be looking back in 10 years, maybe I don't know what I'll be doing then. I'll just still be floating through life probably, but I don't want to look back and say, I've been to all these beautiful places and I couldn't tell you the best place to eat in Esperance or the best site to see down in Tassie. So I guess that experience going somewhere with my family, exploring some of the regions and what they have to offer, I think is something that I need to take forward more in my career. And it's something I'm trying to encourage the younger staff around the company to do. Just take a bit of time, spend an extra weekend in a location somewhere and don't rush it and just take it in because potentially you won't have that opportunity forever. Even if it's just stopping, if you're going to a Bordertown site, just stop at Dadswell Bridge and go inside the giant koala there. just try and enjoy it, I reckon.
That thing is honestly terrifying. When you drive past it at night and the eyes are just glowing red.
Yeah. No, we've got a big magnet of it on the work fridge now so we can just enjoy it all the time.
I want to come back and ask you about staff and management, but just something, when you joined Far Australia, obviously 4 people, and this, I know the challenge of being away from home and travelling a lot, but still being young in your career, how much do you think it has assisted your development, being able to, one, travel, but probably take on those extra responsibilities of, it's been challenging to travel as much as what you have, but also to the acceleration it's probably given you in your career as well.
Yeah. And like I couldn't have done all the travel and stuff without the support of my wife, which I should point that out. She's been like an absolute rock, just holding things down when I'm away for longer periods of time. Like there was even a time during COVID that I went down to Tassie to quarantine so then we could do some jobs and get the field day done. So yeah, couldn't have done what I've done without her support. But I guess coming into the business when there was just four of us, I was quite lucky with the mentors that I had at that time. So Michael, Tracy and Nick were just the most amazing people to work with, and with the best work ethics that I've tried to pick up and carry throughout my career and try and pass on to what I see as the next generation as well. So I've been, again, really fortunate to have those mentors to sort of build me up in the perfect way and sort of shape me really strongly. So not afraid to take on challenges and responsibilities, and all three of them just great teachers of technical and even just personal things as well.
I dare say from their perspective as well, that having someone like yourself come in who's willing to go that extra mile for the sake of the business, like leaving your family during COVID when there's border closures and other things that have to happen, it's a huge undertaking, and kind of being able to have people like yourself in the business, like that's what would make Far Australia extraordinarily successful versus maybe just another ag business.
Yeah, I feel like, and I don't want to seem like I'm bragging or anything, but I feel like at Far there's always been this air of sort of batting above our average, punching above our weight sort of thing, where we're just this small team that get a lot done. And so I think that's a really great motivator, and we've sort of held that on. So a lot of our staff, obviously we're quite open when new staff are coming on about some of the demands of the job. And I guess one of the really important things in managing a team is the communication. So just being really open and real about what the expectations are, but then being open about what the advantages are as well in terms of profile within the industry, the learning opportunities that are there that wouldn't be there for other people. So there's not many people, I think, in our kind of roles as researchers that would get such a national exposure. The farming systems in WA are completely different to Tassie, and Tassie's completely different to Victoria. And I think that's so unique and such a great opportunity for learning, that we're a team that works really hard. But I think when you look at our turnover within the team, we've got a fairly consistent cast of people working for the business, because I think we just love what we do, even though at different times of the year it's quite challenging.
It's all part and parcel. I want to come back because I probably want to finish talking about people, because I'd say that's kind of the thing that I obsess over and find most interesting when it comes to businesses. But just some of the projects that you've worked on, have there been any, I'll say, career-defining projects that you think have really allowed you to step forward? Or, what are those top maybe couple of projects that have really defined your career so far?
Well, the first major project that I work on was the hyper-yielding cereals project down in Tassie. And I guess firstly, I was hugely grateful for it, because it was I think at the time it was the largest project Far Australia had taken on, and it was a long-term 5-year project as well. And it was what allowed Nick to actually be able to have the confidence to take me on as a full-time employee. So firstly, I was very grateful for it, because it essentially gave me a job, I feel, especially in those earlier days. It was a really exciting project. I think the first year, which unfortunately was a year I didn't actually work on it, we had a yield of 17.27, a plot yield of wheat. And so just setting these new benchmarks for what could be achieved down in Tassie. And I don't want to say I jinxed it, but that was the highest yield we achieved in 2016, and we weren't able to recreate it. We got close maybe a couple of times since then, but it was just an amazing project. And I think particularly the last year in 2019 was a really important year for the project. So it was the final year of field trials, and I've got a drone photo that actually sums it up really well. So we had trials looking at fungicide, plant growth regulators, PGRs, insecticides, nutrition, and you can just, from this one drone photo of the site, you can see all the differences with the treatments. So in the PGR trial, you can see the untreated plots are flat on the ground, lodged completely, and then where we've treated them, they're standing up. In the nutrition trial, we had you can pick out the untreated just visually where we didn't put any nitrogen on it. Stands out from all the other plots, but it still yielded 10 tonnes per hectare with no nitrogen. You can see the disease trials where some varieties were giving 5 tonne per hectare differences with and without fungicide, and others were giving no difference in yield to fungicide. And I think there was one variety that if you spent $1 on fungicide, for every dollar you spent on a fungicide, you'd get $14 back, essentially. So these massive differences with phenology. And the other good thing about that project was it wasn't overly prescriptive as well. So we had these things called focus farms. We had some local growers just doing large test strips, testing, scaling up some of the stuff we're finding on site. But they ended up also feeding back into the small plot stuff. So in one of these focus farm test strips, we found there was this one variety that we thought was really suited to Tassie because it was quite long season, especially sown early, but we just couldn't get it to yield as well as we thought it should. And then when we were looking at these large test strips, we could see that, especially when we put the drone up over it, about a third of it was impacted by this mottling yellow colour. And we're like, what's going on here? And it was barley yellow dwarf virus. And for some reason, this variety just seemed really susceptible to barley yellow dwarf virus or BYDV. So we actually set up a trial on site to specifically look at this, and ended up a 5.23 tonne per hectare difference between untreated and treated with insecticides in this same variety. And yeah, really opened our eyes. So we're able to look at all these different aspects, and yeah, if there was something that cropped up that we thought was really relevant to the project, we could sort of just add it into the protocols as well. So I thought that was really special. And that final year, I remember, I think it was the Southern Panel came out to have a look at the trials, and naturally with one of their tours, they'd been held up all day. And by the time they got to us, I think they had about an hour before they had to go catch their flight. And so Nick and I were literally running around the site, trying to get them to all these different trials to see. We had this mantra of seeing is believing, and just trying to get them to see all the differences we had. And that final year of hyper-yielding cereals, I think, really acted as the launch pad for hyper-yielding crops, which then became the national project and went across Australia. Because in that final year down in Tassie, we were having a field day, and I think 70% of the people coming to the field day were actually from the mainland. And we had growers coming from WA and New South Wales, Victoria, saying, oh, we want some of this work in our area. And I think when you got that grower support, that's what you really strive for in the work that we do.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's huge. I want to ask you, just like, and I guess I've have quite a few different conversations with people, and I think one of the things that seems to be like pretty front of mind at the moment, and especially chatting to some of the people through South Australia, Southwest Victoria as well, but especially South Australia with what they've kind of had over the last 12 or 24 months, just the ability to still get yields in these extraordinarily dry and tough seasons just kind of astounds me. With the work through like the hyper yielding cereals and hyper yielding crops, like, do you think are we starting to hit the edges of what's possible, or do you think we're going to see this continue like acceleration of what can be produced off a parcel of land?
I think we've always got room for improvement. I think I'm pretty comfy. I'll have a job doing what I do for as long as I need, researching new things. Growers are obviously getting better and better, and a lot of the people we work with are tweaking some, like, I don't know, you'd think of pretty minor things, but getting some good gains from it. But I think a lot of the stuff from the hyper yielding projects, so both the original and the one that went to the mainland, is being more strategic with what we sort of use. And I think especially in the dry years or lower and medium rainfall zones, some of what we do maybe wouldn't make sense, but what we research in the higher rainfall zone, I think becomes quite relevant in a good season for them. If they've had a string of bad seasons, when you finally do get that good one, you want to make the most of it. But it's hard to research that stuff year in, year out up there. So I think looking to the research we've done maybe further south then becomes a lot more relevant, especially around the disease control, canopy management. A lot of those lessons become very transferable between regions depending on the right season. So being real strategic with some of those results.
With the, like, I guess the challenge of disease burdens and I guess, the fluctuations across rainfall regions, talk to me about some of the projects specifically that you're doing with Queensland DPI around fungicide resistance.
Yeah, so what's keeping me busy at the moment is it's the Program 5 Net Form Net Blotch project looking at integrated disease management. I was joking around at some of our field days that you often get a project, and then the next few seasons while that project's running, you will not get the conditions that project is looking at. You'll get a project looking at early sowing, and then all of a sudden you get all these seasons with late breaks, or you'll get a waterlogging project and have a string of dry years. But that's the opposite to what's happened with this project here. So our first year of trials was in 2023, and that was a year where we actually confirmed some SDHI fungicide resistance in our barley net form net blotch populations. And then obviously last year, some of the big news around the triple mutant. So mutations where there's resistance to essentially three weapons we have to fight net form and net blotch in terms of fungicides, our DMIs, SDHIs and strobes.
Can you spell those out for me, please? Just
Well, the first two are pretty easy. But yeah, so getting the resistance to those three is obviously going to change the way we manage this disease massively. And that's exactly what we're looking at in this project. So being able to produce some figures and economics around the different managements. So looking at paddock hygiene, or one of the biggest levers we can pull is varieties with better ratings to net form, net blotch are becoming really critical and going to become a massive part on how we deal with this disease.
And so how quickly do you think those kind of solutions are going to hit the market?
Well, there's certainly options now. So some of the work that Far Australia are doing, we've got this program called Industry Innovation where Far Australia have set up a bunch of trials. We supply the control treatments in there, and then we've gone to industry and say, what do you have that's a solution for the different things we're looking at? And then their entries into the trials make up the different treatments. And within that umbrella of industry innovations, we have what we call our germplasm evaluation network, where we're looking at different varieties and breeder lines grown with and without fungicide. And so we do this with wheat, barley, canola, oats, and some of the varieties we've got coming through in the barley are really exciting. So we're looking for the ones that with and without fungicide yield essentially the same. And there's varieties coming through the system that sort of tick those boxes, are really strong against net form, net blotch, and sort of become really important for growers to utilise these in the absence of our fungicides really working. And I try not to knock it too much, but there's certain varieties that have been really good to us, but are now absolute suckers for net form, net blotch. And so I guess the sooner we stop growing those, the less we've got to worry about fungicide resistance, hopefully.
The other thing I wanted to come back and talk to you about was obviously the people management side. So as you've grown in the business, you've obviously been able to develop other people coming through and start to coach them in different aspects of their careers. But just from your perspective, and something I think I'd say listeners find really beneficial is like, what's your approach to management, and how have you started to form your own way of managing in the workplace?
I guess I've been quite lucky. Like, I've done a few professional developments around that area, but I guess going into it, I try and model off what I've seen with other people and just try and be open, honest, and have good communication. I've got quite a close relationship with my parents, and I think throughout my career they've been big influences. They're always very supportive. I think Dad in particular worked in management throughout his career and was very passionate about people management, and I think he's been a great sounding board. I often, probably weekly, would give him a call and say, what do you think about this? Or how would you handle this situation? And he's always got a good anecdote, which really stick with me, or some advice. So I lean on them very heavily for their experience and their wisdom and advice. So I'm very grateful for that. And they've also become, I guess, my biggest cheerleaders almost in the industry, because they didn't have the background in agriculture, like I said earlier, but they'll come to the odd field day. I don't think they really take on much technical stuff, but they sort of they're telling me about what they overheard and what people liked from the field day. And I think they've even subscribed to Ground Cover. So they get the magazines in the mail every day. I think they mainly have subscribed just to see if I've gotten my mug in there, but which doesn't, I think it's happened a couple of times and now they just expect it all the time. But they really get around the industry now, even though they're still just in Greensborough.
And so for your staff and even just younger people, what's some of the advice you'd give them? Obviously, your career's remarkable in the sense of where you came from. It was kind of by chance attending that university open day at 16, and that influence of other people on your career? I think you said it's kind of things have happened by chance, but I think it's probably from a willingness to be curious and throw yourself out there and just learn and be a sponge. But what would be your advice to other people out there about the opportunities in the grain sector?
I think you've sort of alluded to it just there, and it's about being curious. I think particularly about the people, which is one of the reasons I obviously went into the industry, was the people. I think if you just show interest into what people are doing, seeing what growers are doing differently, just show interest and, like you said, take everything on as a sponge. I think that's going to be your best way forward. And particularly if you're like me, not having that network or connections, I think just having an open mind, talking to people, it seems scary at the start. No, it is literally what I've talked to my staff about, is just get out there, get to updates, get to field days and just strike up conversations with people. They're not going to mind. It might seem like everyone's in their own little huddles with people they know really well, but just break in, say good day, and you never know what can happen. And everyone's so open and willing to share in the industry. I think it's a brilliant place to be, and you can really utilise that.
I love it. Darcy, I guess before we sign off, anything else that you wanted to talk about or raise at this stage?
I've probably rambled on enough for you. I think I've covered most of the talking points that I had down, but I only glanced at it a couple of times, but I think I've covered it off. I'm pretty happy, and hopefully there's enough for you to clip together to make a reasonable podcast for people to listen to.
Absolutely, mate. And one thing, I'm going to ask a favour of you, because we need a little testimonial, because it's been really interesting. We've chatted to, well, it must be north of 50 odd people now in the grain sector. We've had Seed of Lot award winners. We've had all sorts of different people. But one of the challenges we've got now with GRDC In Conversation is we're reaching out to some people and they're declining based on the fact that they don't feel comparable to others who have been on there. And I've tried to shut it down in the sense of going, well, everyone's unique and everyone's at different stages. Not everyone's got 50 plus years of experience in their career, but equally people are passionate about the grain sector. And I think these are the stories people love sharing. But can you help me and GRDC out a little bit? Just a word of what it's been like to be at the other end on the microphone, but also too why it is really important that we see all sorts of different people getting involved and sharing their story.
Yeah, well, I had exactly the same sentiment when we talked on the phone, sort of saying, like, because I've listened to plenty of in Conversation podcasts, and yeah, they're always really interesting people. And I was sort of saying, oh, why is Oli calling me for? But I guess even if you don't think, everyone's experiences are different and you don't know who they'll benefit. Like, you might just think you're run of the mill or, I don't know, boring, but that it's, everyone's different and you don't know who will pick it up. I'm lucky enough to talk to students each year, like often the Melbourne Uni or La Trobe students will come out to the site. And I guess in my case, you do come across plenty of people without an ag background. And so it's become quite a passion for me to try and get across to those people in any way possible and just say, this is a brilliant industry to be a part of. But I think it's, really important to get your story out there and don't be shy. You don't have to have 50 years experience for it to be interesting or changing for somebody, because you just don't know what their thoughts are, I guess.
Absolutely. Well, mate, thank you so much for sitting down with me and being part of GRDC In Conversation.
No, it's been my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Well, that's it for another episode of GRDC In Conversation. I hope you're enjoying coming around Australia just as much as I am, meeting the people who are shaping Australia's grain sector and ensuring that we're able to keep thriving for future generations. If you know someone who you'd love to see us get on the podcast, reach out to the GRDC via their social channels or via your local rep. The next In Conversation episode is back in a fortnight's time, so mark your diaries. We can't wait to see you then.